Good morning, Super Talk. And now that you've spilled your coffee or energy drink, whatever that may be.
Or Black Label.
Or Black Label. That's right. Whatever you got to do.
Get it going.
I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to ask questions. It's Dez, your MTV refugee, your peripheral visionary, your tour guide to the far side. And I'm back. And my voice is back with me. I don't know. Woo! I filled in for Matt last Friday and had no voice. Subsequently found out that I was on the tail end, the non-contagious end of having had strep and didn't know it.
Wow.
And so finally my body said, okay, dude, if you're not going to get a clue any other way, I'm taking your voice away. So 3 hours of talk radio without a voice. That was, I've done a lot of stuff in my life, but that was right up there. So we're about to go on a wild ride. I'm back in the 9 to 12 groove, where I'm a little bit more familiar, more comfortable. And keep your hands in the car and your restraint device locked at all times. Don't stand up during the ride, remember how they used to say, there were these urban legends of people that got beheaded for, they stood up on a ride.
Yeah. Their hand was cut off because they extended their, it's like, what? Really?
That would make
why are we on this?
Why are we on this exactly? And if it's that dangerous, then why don't they just saran wrap people into the seat so they can't move? See, I'm on a tangent already, but that's the way I roll. So we're not in Kansas anymore. Well, actually, Mac's literally not in Kansas anymore. You know the drill. We're not in the era of red versus blue, right versus left. Conservative versus liberal. We're living in the age of reality versus unreality. And on this show, we're going to break that down. In America, we've gone from different perspectives to different planets. So here's the deal. Just to restripe the field. I no longer call myself a conservative. I call myself a clear thinker. And I hope you do too by now. I hope I've convinced you to do likewise. See, every clear thinker adheres to conservative principles, but not every self-identified conservative is a clear thinker. We're out to change that. That's why we have founded the Clear Thinkers Party. There's no dues. There's no initiation fee. All you got to do is just commit to growing a fully developed brain and zealously contending for reality. That's it. So we're on a mission to separate the clear thinkers from the Kool-Aid drinkers and make America think again. So here we go.
Let the cartoon begin.
It's on now. We just watched the Mario movie at home.
Oh, nice.
My two youngest boys are huge Mario fans, especially Cannon, huge Mario fan. So, the whole Donkey Kong thing is alive and well again. But that's if you at all either are a fan of the game or just a fan of just good stories and great animation, it's really worth seeing. It's worth seeing. So anyway, I digress. So I want to quickly tease something. In hour 3, in the third hour today, I'm going to have a guest on, and he's a fascinating guy, somebody I've just gotten to know lately through a mutual friend, Chief Beck. He goes by Chief, former Special Forces, right down the line, SEAL Team 6, pretty much everything you can think of in terms of this guy's military credentials. But he actually... upon leaving the military after, a storied career and, 14 deployments, all sorts of medals, became convinced that he needed to transition. And I'm not going to share too much of the story right now. I'm going to let him tell his own story. But, he's been interviewed by Dr. Phil and Anderson Cooper and Joe Rogan and a bunch of folks. So, so he has sunk so low as to agree to be on this show. Not really. Good man. Looking forward to having him. So that's in the third hour, and that's coming up. So here's what we're going to do. We're gonna fly full speed ahead here. And I'm still a little bit hoarse, but, much better than before. So we're going to start with, we're going to pull out the "you can't make this stuff up" file. Seems like a good place to start, right? So there's a Harvard professor whose claim to fame was publishing research on honesty, on the subject of honesty. Well, it's just recently come to light that she lied about her findings. So the professor whose research was about honesty was dishonest. So let's read a little bit here. So a Harvard Business School behavioral scientist who co-authored widely cited research on honesty has been accused of fabricating findings, the New York Times reported. As I continue, and this is her speaking, as I continue to evaluate these allegations and assess my options, what options? I'm limited into what I can say publicly. Well, you didn't limit yourself when you were lying through your teeth. Francesca Gino said in a post on LinkedIn, to which she referred The Blaze, which is where the article came from, when reached for comment Sunday morning. I want to assure you that I take them seriously and they will be addressed. Gino also said in the post, adding that there will be more to come on all of this. What more is there to say? You got busted. So Gino's work, among other topics, explores the effectiveness of simple interventions that could encourage honesty. For example, a widely cited 2012 paper looked at whether people would be more honest in filling out tax or insurance documents if a question asking them to attest to their honesty were placed at the top of the form instead of the bottom, explained the New York Times. And this is the New York Times. I mean, it's not like this is Breitbart or something. This is like the Times. So questions about the data underlying the published work of Harvard Business School's Francesca Gino came into question in a piece in the Chronicles of Higher Education, not to be confused with the Chronicles of Narnia, earlier this month. The irony of this being a story about data fraud and a paper on inducing honesty is not lost on me. Harvard Business School's Max Bazerman, a co-author of Gino on one of the honesty studies in question, told the publication, Data Colada, not to be confused with Pina Colada, a group blog that examines the integrity of social science research, launched a 4-part series called Data, where did they get this stuff? Data Falsificata. It sounds like something you'd order at lunch. Examining what they say is evidence of fraud in 4 papers authored by Gino. The first, entitled, are you ready? Cluster Fake, was published June 17th. Okay, so I rest my case. So the irony, for clear thinkers, the irony is not lost upon us. If it wasn't so sad, it would be hilarious. And it kind of is both at the same time. But we have a situation where even when confronted with the lie, rather than just fessing up, rather than just saying, you know what, busted, it was stupid, not even claiming, temporary insanity or, the devil made me do it, whatever. It's just going immediately backpedaling into some sort of academia speech and giving, non-answer answers and making it sound like, Gandalf's going to come to the rescue and everything's going to be resolved. So we're going to talk more about this on the other side of the break. But again, we are now deeply into the "you can't make this stuff up" file. A lot more to come. Dez Dickerson, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be right back.
U.S. Supreme Court has just ended an era in college admissions in this country. We'll tell you about it at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
So that's huge. That ruling is a huge thing, and it's something that I'm probably going to cover tomorrow. I'm back with you tomorrow. Some of you were elated, some of you were bummed, but I'm back tomorrow, and we'll go into that in depth because there's needless to say there are generations who have never known a time in America where there wasn't affirmative action, and I will tease my position a little bit. I'm a huge believer in both meritocracy and enlightened self-interest. The incentive that comes from the potential of having zero ceiling, a potential that's tied only to your willingness to work, excel, and succeed. And when you take that away from people not only underachieve, but, and I'm just going to real quickly, because maybe you've heard, the folk proverb about the elephant. I don't know if this is true or not. If there are any elephant trainers out there, please feel free to call in and enlighten us. But, supposedly they used to, when elephants, in the circus, et cetera, when the elephants were small, they put, heavy gauge shackles and chains on them and stake them out, and the elephants would fight and struggle against the chains, against the bondage. And as they got older, they began to take the bondage for granted, and they would struggle less. And then they would just switch out the chain for rope. And even though the elephant was more than large enough and powerful enough to break free from that bondage, they stopped trying. Well, that's what happens to people. So anyway, I got deeper into the Kool-Aid than I had planned on doing, but we will talk about that decision tomorrow. In the meantime, though, in the, again, you can't make this stuff up column, we're talking about the Harvard scientist or professor known for publishing research on honesty who, got exposed for lying about her findings. So just to kind of put a bow on that, Professor Gino's page on Harvard Business School's website indicates she's on administrative leave. See, that's what they do in places where they just can't fire your backside, or they're too nice to do it. They put you on administrative leave and then quietly ship you to a gulag somewhere. But Gino was not listed as being on leave as recently as mid-May, according to the New York Times. So, the cat was out of the bag, but they didn't until the heat got too hot for them. I'm assuming it's when the Times started publishing that, then it's like, well, we can't have that. So the professor did not return requests for comment from the Chronicle of Higher Education nor the New York Times. And Harvard Business School declined comment to the New York Times. So there you go. I would decline comment to the New York Times too, by the way. Put it this way: if the New York Times editorial board was in my living room, I'd be out back doing something. And just say that's how much respect I have for them. So here's the thing: we're going to use this as a jumping off point into a broader kind of foundational issue, and it's that a growing segment of what were once trusted sectors of society now operate in complete and utter unreality. From education and academia, which our example came from, public service, politics, obviously, don't get me started on that. Media and journalism. There was a time, Walter Cronkite, he was not by any means, a far-right ideologue, but people trusted him, and the man was consistent in his presentation of the news. In the psychiatric community, psychology, psychiatry, again, much to be said. In both the legal profession and the judiciary, ample evidence of just unreality. All you got to do is look at some of the decisions handed down that are more, politics and social engineering than they are anything that has to do with the law. The law enforcement and intelligence community. And I'm not so much referring to, rank and file, the police that protect and serve on, local and state levels. I'm talking more so about, the so-called top cops, where, and again, I don't want to go, I could easily just go in and do the rest of the show on just what has come to light with respect to the FBI. The FBI that was once trusted, J. Edgar Hoover aside. So there's growing and overwhelming evidence of an untethering from reality in these and other once trusted segments. Now, there have long been portions of society, just to balance this so you don't hear what I'm not saying, there have long been portions of society which have harbored, at best, mistrust of some of these groups. And it's not, an epiphany for me to say that of late in particular, the subject, the topic of distrust amongst, I'm going to use the terms, people and communities of color and law enforcement, the justice system, et cetera, those things have come to the forefront. Now, here's the thing. Is there evidentiary justification for it? Well, I'm here to tell you, of course there is. Is there the necessity of this monolithic condemnation that we've seen come from the unreality cohort? Well, of course not. But I can tell you, as someone who's, been around for a minute, and I've been black for a long time. But I was raised by black people. So here's the thing. I have some firsthand experience. And I can tell you that there was a time when things were much different than they are now. Even having been, born and raised in a city, an area that my parents chose to sort of migrate to because things were better in pre-civil rights times for them and for folks like us at that time. But the bottom line is those were people problems. Those were bad apple problems. And now were some institutionalized? Certainly there were. But laws changed, times changed. And for people to equate the realities of, some of the brutalities, both, literal and psychological, emotional, that took place at that time to now, microaggressions. Please, I dealt with some actual aggressions. Get out of the car, assume the spread eagle position on the hood. So here's the bottom line. Again, the point to be made is that there are folks that harbor mistrust, and I get it. But in the main, all of these areas, these were trusted stewards of the civil society for decades. And now, I don't know about you, but I don't trust them any further than I can throw a Buick. So we're going to continue on this tack. We're going to get into this. And again, just to be clear, I am a supporter of law enforcement. I want to be clear in making the statements that I'm making in the light of the fact that I understand that there are people who hold different perspectives and points of view based upon their past experiences. But your past experiences are not the basis for future expectation in every situation. So I hope I've made that point. So we are rapidly approaching. Man, time flies when your voice comes back. That's all I can say. You know what I'm saying, man? Time flies. I'm just so happy. So it's Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson back with you, and we will return in a moment.
"9:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top story. Still got that crash blocking your way if you're trying to get to downtown on northbound 65. Northbound 65's got a right lane block there at Armory Drive. Heat alerts and bad air quality. The air in Middle Tennessee is in the unhealthy for sensitive groups range. That's meaning people with heart and lung disease should limit time outdoors today. Breaking news from our nation's capital: colleges and universities can no longer consider a person's race when deciding which students get placed. The U.S. Supreme Court decision was 6-3, with Chief Justice John Roberts issuing the reading saying it's the student's story, not identity, that will be the determining factor. The High Court also siding with a Christian postal worker who quit over having to work a Sunday shift. This could have a major impact on the American workplace on Sundays moving forward. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. One of the things you hear me talk about frequently on my radio show that has been going for over 20 years in the Nashville market is that annuity sales are not necessarily a great thing for the end investor. Now, if you go to an investment firm, a lot of times you'll get that. The first thing that they recommend, an annuity. Banks and investment firms recommend these for one really good reason. And many times that reason isn't the best thing for you. It's commissions. It's a huge moneymaker for the investing industry. This is why I think it's so important that when you work with an investment advisor, that they not be paid on commission. It creates a huge conflict because it creates an incentive to sell you things that may not be in your best interest. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. We don't do anything on commissions. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
Yeah. And obviously that's a rhetorical question. Because can you ever really be ready?
Yeah.
You know what, guys?
Yeah.
Can you ever really be ready? Be careful when you think you stand, lest you fall. You know?
That's right.
So, and, again, nothing like it's a good day when you hear some corn before 10 a.m. It's a good day.
Yes.
I feel good, in the words of James Brown. So, we're talking about this disconnect at the highest levels. You've heard me talk in the past about the pathocracy, that there's a pathology that has sort of metastasized and formed into a system that we borrowed the term from a professor who calls it the pathocracy. It's like the Borg in Star Trek, you know what I'm saying? So, we have all these areas that I named, academia, politics, media, the clinical profession, psychology, psychiatry, the legal and judiciary, in the intelligence community, all these areas. These were trusted stewards, people that we entrusted with the levers of power. And, I was raised in a generation that started out compliant. And when they said, Johnny, the policeman is your friend, you believed him. When they said, Johnny, lawyers and judges are always honest and they handle that responsibility with honor. And we believed all that stuff. But see, the difference is now we live in the age of unreality. All of that was rooted in reality. We as a nation rooted in reality. The founders could have easily said, one nation under reality. But now we're in the age of reality versus unreality. We have to do battle with unreality at every turn. And I'm not being overly dramatic. I'm serious. If you're not a clear thinker and you don't apply the filter of clear thinking and reality to the information that we're bombarded with here in the information age, well, again, you got to be careful. You can pick up a virus. So because the unreality cohort, and that's what we call that segment, and they go by many names, the neo-progressive left. Yeah, the term liberal, I don't know if, I'm sure many of you know this, but that was actually stolen in the first place because classical liberalism is actually much more aligned with what we would call conservatism today. But because progressives had sort of encroached and stolen what had been liberal space or an ideological space at that time that was falling into disrespect, they lifted the term. Even then they would lift terms. They lifted the term from classical liberalism, and they called themselves liberals, even though it was the first wave of progressives, Woodrow Wilson and all those scoundrels. So at any rate, not to get into a deep dive history lesson, but because the unreality cohort disavows and refuses to recognize reality wherever they may be found, it doesn't matter. If a judge, if a general in the Pentagon, if anyone from that cohort encounters reality, their response is to try to alter it, to try to put a spin on it, to try to take reality and through the dishonest manipulation of the language, turn it into unreality. So because of that, things like their past actions, their past claims, like this professor, you're busted red-handed. And instead of just, doing like, I don't know, George Washington did it with the apple tree, as we're taught, and just saying, I cannot tell a lie. Here it is. I was going to roll into a bad joke, but I'm going to restrain myself. So all these things, these past claims, past actions, they don't matter. Even when it's like, dude, the camera was rolling. and they will simply dismiss everything from the Burisma bribe. And that's a prime example. It's forever captured on film. You bribed a government, they buckled, and you laughed about it. And the left just wants to say, what? Oh, no, nothing to see here. I mean, and there are other things. There are numerous climate change end of days claims. And I'm not here to make a case one way or the other, although this is America. People should be able to make their case for and against, pro and con. We should be able to do that. That's kind of what we were founded on. But here's my point. There are things, again, we have the video, we've got the audio, we've got the articles, the internet never forgets. You know, in the words of Bob Seger, rock and roll never forgets, neither does the internet. So, you know, you got people that said we were going to be dead by now. We were going to be parboiled by now. That the oceans were going to be bubbling and all of that stuff. But in the words of the prophet Elton John, I'm still standing. So, you know, it's like this Obi-Wan Kenobi Jedi mind trick that we're all just supposed to like, oh, okay, well, I guess that didn't happen. So when on the one hand, they want to chill and shut down speech because the science is settled. Quiet, infidel. You cannot disagree. Just you know, a point of order. Science is not settled. That's not the way the scientific method works, but I digress. Time and time again, the so-called scientific research was either created out of whole cloth, like Professor Gino, or it was yanked from some nether regions somewhere and foisted upon the rest of us. So in turn, it's not surprising when these pathologies are reflected in the general population. So we're going to play, and we're going to play a cut here in a second. Mac the Nice is about to spin one up for us. But there's, just to give you a quick backstory, there's a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old, you know, and I will call her African-American in this case. I hate that whole hyphenated thing, but she actually has an African name, and you know, obviously he's directly, her family came over from the continent. So she, well, you know what? We'll play the cut and then I'll talk about it later. Here we go.
Okay, let's go. You didn't let me get my moment, so I want to say my name is Kadijata Diallo, and I'm graduating today. I don't like how you snatched the mic out of my hand, so today is going to be all about me.
Oh, drop the mic. Congratulations.
And I love the like the hype woman in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, she dropped the mic.
She actually slammed. She actually spiked the mic.
Yeah, she really did. It was a Gronk spike.
Yeah. So, and it was like crazy. It was a graduation outdoors, right? I think it's LaGuardia Community College or something in like the Bronx or something. And this student literally wrestles the microphone away from the woman, you know, the obvious prestigious member of the faculty who's handing out the degrees, and just it's like for a minute like WWE broke out, and she just wrestled it away, and then you heard what ensued. So the thing is, and I'm going to read a bit from the article here in a second, but the thing is, she subsequent to that, she made the statement after receiving some criticism. Well, let's read a bit. So a New York City community college has called out a graduate who was caught on now viral video ripping a microphone from a staff member's hand during a commencement ceremony last week. So it is LaGuardia Community College in Queens. I had the wrong borough. Told the New York Post that it's investigating the dust-up involving Kadia Iman, who engaged in a short but intense wrestling match for the microphone with an older female staff member. 22-second video originally appeared on her TikTok page last week, amassed over 3 million likes and 24 million views, but now her TikTok page has gone private. So subsequently, she said, and as you could hear, you know, she took the microphone and then said, "You didn't let me get my moment, and I'm graduating today. I don't like how you snatched the mic out of my hand." She had a backstory on that didn't make sense. So today it's going to be all about me. Well, today it's going to be all about me. So we have a prime example, a living, breathing example. Oh, by the way, subsequently, her claim was to the critics that as a black woman in America, this is a quote, she's always right. As a black woman in America, see, she claimed black woman privilege, evidently. So the false socio-racial narrative that informs her thinking is now common. But it's a gravely mistaken notion. And that notion is that because she's been aggrieved, she's now entitled. How apropos that we're talking about this on the morning the Supreme Court booted affirmative action. Because she's been aggrieved, she's now entitled. And understand, for one segment, a sizable segment of our populace, that's the narrative to which they subscribe. And I'm not talking about just hyphenated Americans. It's not just black people who buy into it, but even more so, it's the white, as I said earlier, neo-progressive liberals, the unreality cohort, who create, curate, and control that narrative. So there are people, this is an amplified echo of people like Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's like an entitled maniac at the New York Times, another woman of color, who's behind the 1619 Project. If you don't know what that is, Google it, check it out. But that and other hallucinogenic works of revisionist fiction, who's been empowered, she's been empowered and elevated by her enablers in the media, and other fellow delusionaries. I call them delusionaries because they think they're revolutionaries, but they're delusional, including the Pulitzer Prize Committee, by the way. So we're going to take a break in a second. I'm just kind of round this off before the end of the hour and kind of finish up with this particular kind of mine that we've jumped into. But we're going to talk a little bit more about not just Nicole Hannah-Jones, but that whole sort of stream of unreality that now is firmly entrenched. The pathology has metastasized and grown into a pathocracy. And it's like an old sci-fi movie now. You know, they dwell among us. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson and this morning. We will be right back.
Major implications to affirmative action coming from the Supreme Court today. Also, Christians working on Sundays. We'll tell you about that ruling coming up at 10 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I tell you what, if you're a pastor or a worship leader, for that matter, an usher or a parking lot attendant, you're working every Sunday, but I digress. So,
well, now you have a reason to take a day off.
There you go. What would happen if the pastor took Sunday off and didn't tell anybody?
It's against my religion to work on Sundays.
Wow, my head is spinning. So I'm going to try to wrap this up before we get to the top of the hour here. We're talking about Nicole Hannah-Jones and really talking about how, because of what's happened in the culture at large and indoctrination and education and all sorts of other things, what we have is the dissociation that's been adopted by some of the people in the corridors of power. It's trickled down to people graduating from junior college, and people are doing crazy things because essentially they are crazy. I mean that's dissociative, behavior. That's crazy. So with Nicole Hannah-Jones, her insanity is sanctioned. New York Times, Pulitzer Prize. Interestingly, though, again, as the one behind the 1619 Project, she's been strongly criticized by actual historians who expressed strong reservations about the project and requested factual corrections. And they accused her and the project's other creators and participants of prioritizing ideology over historical accuracy. Well, you think. But none of that kept Hulu and ABC from further bestowing some sort of cloak of legitimacy over the whole 1619 Project. ABC recently aired in linear form the 1619 Project sort of special, if you will, that began as a 6-episode Hulu series, presenting as fact what's really just a work of meth head fiction. They made it up. And see, we wonder why people grab mics at graduation and act crazy. I don't, though. And I don't think you do either, because we're clear thinkers. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson with you. Going to be back after the break with You Can't Make This Stuff Up, Part 2. See you in a minute.
Ten o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. The hottest days of the year upon us, mixing with the smoke from Canada wildfires, making the air in Middle Tennessee unhealthy for sensitive groups. Talking about people with heart and lung disease. They're encouraged to limit time outdoors today. Full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. Major impacts from U.S. Supreme Court decisions today. Terry Moran says one ruling ends considering a person's race when it comes to college admissions.
Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the court and striking down Harvard's and University of North Carolina's admissions policies, said that they used race in a negative manner, involved racial stereotyping, and they lacked meaningful endpoints. When would they know that the balance had been achieved?
Yeah, the Chief Justice saying it must be tied to that student's individual experience. Another decision could have major impacts on American workers and employers. The Supreme Court siding today with a Christian postal worker who was fired for refusing to work on Sundays based on his faith. And more breaking news on the war on Ukraine. Reports say former Vice President Mike Pence has met with President Volodymyr Zelensky in a surprise visit to Ukraine. Brand new economic data has just been released. Jim Ryan with the details in this latest report from the Commerce Department.
Consumers in the first 3 months of the year were spending at the fastest pace since 2021, driving the nation's gross domestic product to a 2% annual growth rate. Not only were cash registers chiming around the U.S., but the country's exports were stronger than anticipated. A separate report showed the prices we're paying for goods, excluding food and energy, rose at a slower rate in the first quarter than initially thought.
President Biden this week touting his economic vision, which he says is working for the American people, while a recent poll shows just 24% of Americans feel the state of the economy is, quote, excellent or good. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And we're back. Whether you want it or not.
We're here. We're coming.
We're here. That's right. But it's really too hot to do anything drastic.
Oh, gosh, it's so hot.
I mean, I've said it before. I've lived here 33 years. I claim it. This is home. But the one thing, it's like Superman and Kryptonite. The one thing that I've never, ever been able to reconcile is like the humidity mixed with the heat.
Oh, and we're going to get that.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we got rain coming. Oh, gosh.
See, my oldest son lives, he and his family live in Arizona, and it's 110, 115 there all the time. But, it's like a pizza oven there. It's not like, the
dry heat.
It's a whole different thing. And it's kind of funny because they'll say, well, yeah, it's 115 now, but it's dry. It's still 115.
It's still triple digits.
That's still hot. Unless you're eating iguana, that's just hot. But 115 here? Good Lord. What's that spray stuff? Get out the Pam. Get out a can of Pam.
Oh, yeah.
So a little garnish, and we'll just do it that way. But crazy. Okay. So speaking of crazy, let's talk about New York City for a minute. Okay, again, the New York Times. I've quoted the New York Times more this morning than, I think Jesus is coming soon. Just get ready. That's all I can say. But per the New York Times, there was a 22% increase in overall major crime in New York City in 2022 year over year compared to the year prior. 189,777 arrests citywide in 2022. Again, a 22% increase from 2021. 47,572 of those arrests were for the most serious crimes: homicide, rape, robbery, felony assault, burglary, grand larceny, and of course, grand larceny of a motor vehicle, better known as Grand Theft Auto. And I know some of you played that game. Don't look at me so innocently. So the city saw the most gun arrests that they had seen in 27 years. In a city, by the way, where you can't you have to have a permit, and a permit is harder to get than the Holy Grail. 4,627 gun arrests. And I'm not even going to ask the cynical question, well, where'd all those guns come from? So per CNN, and again, not known as a far-right news organization, major crimes were up 60% in the month of February compared to the same month in 2021. Early January 2023, the first 3 weeks of this year, NYPD statistics showed serious assaults had surged more than 18% compared to the same period in 2022. I'm going somewhere with this, so bear with me. Rapes were also up 16%. The New York Post claims at the same time the year before, overall major crimes, and this number is different than the New York Times number, not surprising, the Post and the Times, they claim that major crimes were up 35.2%, with a near doubling of auto thefts and a 61.7% increase in grand larcenies. Now, a law enforcement source said that NYPD was dealing, quote, with a pattern of recidivism that's amplified, unquote, by criminal justice reforms, including cashless bail, new evidence rules, etc. Well, you think prosecutors, I'd hate to be a prosecutor. I'd hate to be a prosecutor anywhere, but being a prosecutor there would be like the most frustrating job on the planet. Prosecutors blame these for pushing up the number of cases that get dismissed. Well, of course they do, because that's the design. Because all the DAs, like DA Alvin Bragg in New York and Krasner in Philadelphia, all the other ones that George Soros $40 million bought in blue cities that were already in trouble. Let's just make it worse. So as of November 2022, again, the aforementioned district attorney in New York, Alvin Bragg, You know Alvin Bragg. He's the one. He's you heard of the movie Get Shorty? He's Get Trump. That's his thing. So he downgraded 52% of all felony cases that came to his office to misdemeanors. So 52% of the felony cases in the city of New York, and that's all the boroughs as I understand it, he downgraded to misdemeanors compared to the 39% downgraded in 2019. That's still a staggering number. But 52% versus 39%. So he also, and this is as soon as he was elected, he stopped prosecuting armed robberies of businesses under $1,000 limit. So get this picture. You could walk into the CVS strapped, have people hit the floor, and as long as you had your calculator out and made sure you didn't go past $999.99 in what you were heisting at gunpoint, the most they could throw at you if they caught you is a misdemeanor. And obviously, subsequently, they just stopped. They don't even bother anymore. People go in like, like it's the PX on the military base or whatever. They just take stuff because they know they're not going to get in trouble. He also stopped prosecuting resisting arrest, prostitution, and trespassing. It's legal to trespass in New York City. Think about that. Now, there are other places where you trespass, they're probably going to shoot till they're clicking, but in New York City. So here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line for New York City. Prosecutors who won't prosecute or enforce laws, crime soaring, a mayor and a DA who are crime friendly.
Take control. Take control of your city.
That's what they need. They need Bain. They don't need Eric Adams. They need Bain, for crying out loud. Take control of your city. I love that.
That's so good.
One of my favorite performances of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So I said all of that to say this. I said all that to create a backdrop and stripe the field for where we're actually going here. I have an article that says critics rail against New York City crackdown on coal and wood-fired ovens. That's right. Coal and wood-fired ovens, ladies and gentlemen. So critics sounded off, it says Monday, this article was written last week, I believe, against New York City's proposed crackdown on coal and wood-fired ovens in the name of climate change. This is utter BS. It won't make a difference to climate change, Elon Musk tweeted. Always in it. Reacting to the New York Post report that the New York City Department of Environmental Protection is proposing new rules that would require eateries, including the Big Apple's famous pizzerias and bagel shops, that use coal and wood-fired ovens to reduce carbon emissions by, are you ready for this? 75%. I think they wanted to just microwave the pizza. I think that must be it. You don't mess with New Yorkers' pizza or bagels, period, tweeted Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, a Republican who represents the county that borders the borough of Queens in New York City. So he goes on to say, the enviro crazies want to wreck New York pizza. Can't we have a rebirth of common sense? So here's the bottom line. They want to hammer pizza joints so that they reduce wood and coal emissions by 75%. And, there's equipment, scrubbers, whatever, to accomplish this, but it costs money, like real money. And even then, the effect that it has, and I didn't go on to read the whole thing, but the impact that it has on the process by which the pizzas and the bagels are baked, it changes it. It's not the same. So New York City lets criminals go free, turns a blind eye to crime, but by golly, they're cracking down on climate change. God bless him. So after Lady Liberty and Grand Central Station and maybe a couple other things, Times Square, whatever, few things are more synonymous with the city than pizza. And that would be like Philadelphia, like banning beef and requiring like tofu-based cheese sticks, like those commercials. I'm eating a sandwich made of a delicious sandwich made of vegetables. Well, I don't want that. I want tasty morsels that used to have a face. That's what I want. Or what if Kansas City like outlawed barbecue? Sorry, no barbecue here. We're doing our part to end climate change. Well, it's silly. So here's the bottom line. You can't make this stuff up. New York City is a raging dumpster fire, but the thing that they're addressing is wood and coal emissions that are the pollutants released by those dreaded criminals, the pizza joints. I can't take it. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson with you. I'm going to take several deep breaths, try to slow my heartbeat and bring my blood pressure down, and we'll be right back.
The game has been changed when it comes to considering race in college admissions policies. Also, Christians who don't want to work on Sundays. These stories and more at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
From my heart and from my hand, why don't people understand my intention?
That's right. We got a weird science update. Except this is really weird science. And there's been a lot of talk. There's always talk about innovation and scientific developments and breakthroughs, all that stuff. But, and I'm sure back in the day, it's like, when people talked about like the telegraph, it was like, people talking about AI now. And speaking of AI, there's a lot of talk about it, like all sort of, scientific developments that go from, sort of the tech space into the broader culture. There's a lot of talk pro and con. There's actually, there's a talk, not really a TED Talk, but a conference that the two guys that did the Social Dilemma documentary did a talk. If you're serious about understanding AI, you need to Google this thing and look it up, because it's well, you need to see it. I'm not going to spoil it, but I think much of the talk that kind of goes on, kind of the surface stuff that goes on in the social space or whatever, with respect to AI, it misses the real issues concerning the potential for unintended consequences. Everybody's having fun with, we had Chat GPT write a new, Lennon and McCartney song or whatever. And folks are kind of distracted by AI authored resumes and, Beatles songs and pictures of things and people that actually don't exist. But you know what I mean? And people are like having fun with that. Just like people had fun with FaceApp. Anybody remember FaceApp? The other thing that's funny about FaceApp was that for about 2 weeks, it was like blazes. It was the hottest thing in the history of things. But then all of a sudden, the call went out. It's the Russians, and they're stealing your data. And it died overnight. You know what's funny? TikTok is owned by the Chinese Communist Party. Didn't have the same reaction there. I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to drop that mic and just leave it. But I'm just amused by things like that. So AI, and its implications, that is what it is. And we'll see where all that goes. And I have a feeling that there's more going on with it than we, hear about, people tweet about, whatever. But what I want to talk about this morning, the actual really weird science I want to talk about. Here's the headline. Scientists create synthetic human embryos, eliminating need for sperm and eggs, thereby raising major ethical concerns. Do you think? Do you think there should be major ethical concerns? So scientists at the University of Cambridge and the California Institute of Technology appear to have successfully accomplished what abortionists and libertines have only managed in a piecemeal fashion over recent decades. They have severed reproduction from fertilization. Researchers have produced synthetic human embryos using stem cells, bypassing the need for sperm or eggs altogether, reported The Guardian. According to Quanta magazine, Cambridge professor Magdalena Zernicka-Getz and Jacob Hanna. Why do scientists always have hyphenated names? I'm just saying. At the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, Israel, have worked in recent years to craft mouse embryo models from stem cells, then grown them into nutrient-filled bottles, which served as a kind of crude artificial uterus. Their monster creations soon developed the basis of what would become a spinal column, along with the bulbous blob of the nascent head and even a primitive beating heart. While they were meddling with mice, a multi-institutional team of researchers led by Chinese reproductive engineer. Why is it when anything nefarious goes on, the Chinese aren't far behind? Chinese reproductive engineer Zhen Lu at the State Key Laboratory of Neuroscience, operative word state, in Shanghai. Surely nothing can go wrong from a lab in China. Reportedly generated synthetic embryos using monkey embryonic stem cells, then successfully initiated pregnancies in monkeys via a process resembling in vitro fertilization. Rather than abandon rodents to retread Lu's monkey business, Zernicka Getz and Hannah endeavored to tinker with the world's top primate. Zernicka Getz detailed her latest work in a plenary address Wednesday before the International Society for Stem Cell Research in Boston. I wonder if Gru was there. We can create human embryo-like models by the reprogramming of embryonic stem cells. Zernicka Getz described cultivating human embryos beyond the equivalent of 14 days of development for a natural embryo when the synthetic embryo reached the beginning of a developmental milestone known as gastrulation, when the embryo transforms from a continuous sheet of cells to forming distinct cell lines and setting up the basic axes of the body. At this stage, the embryo does not yet have a beating heart, gut, or beginnings of a brain, but the model showed the presence of primordial cells that are the precursor cells of egg and sperm, noted the Guardian. So, and I could go on, because there's a lot there, and it gets a lot creepier. It's pretty creepy as it is, but it gets a lot creepier. So here's the point that I want to make. Here's the point that I want to interject. Life is more than sentience or animation. It's more than that. It's more than, than what we see in old black and white sci-fi movies. In fact, Mac, play cut 4 for us real quick. When you get it. Life.
It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
It's more than the old Frankenstein movie. It's a quality imparted, not created or manufactured, and only by the one, capital O, who is life. And you don't have to agree with that. I've been very open on this show. I'm a talk show host, but I'm also a pastor, ordained since the late 80s. And for me, the bottom line is, as one who wants to be, above all else, a clear thinker, that's one thing to think through clearly to its basis, to its source. What is life and where does life come from? So if you are a believer in and of the Bible, God created Adam, breathed the breath of life into him, and he became a living soul. Prior to that, he was stuff made from the dust of the ground. All the elements that are in the earth are present in our physical bodies, correct? So life was imparted by the one who is life, the only one with that authority or capacity. And I don't care, Dr. Guernica gets the worm, whatever. No one else has that authority or capacity, no matter how much bumbling and stumbling they do in the lab, creating things who may be animated, who may even be sentient. But it's not life by this foundational definition. See, man can copy and duplicate like a digital alias file or 3D printing or something, but cannot create life, can't make something from nothing. Still don't have the ability to do that. The Frankenstein movie, they pulled it off with lightning and whatever, but that was a movie. You are a spirit, you have a soul, and you reside in a physical body. Your soul being composed of mind, will, and emotions. You can't do that on your own. There's not an app for that. And not a mere human being. You and I, we're not mere human beings attempting to have a spiritual experience, but we're spirit beings mastering the human experience if we're about the business of doing so. A synthetic human would be devoid of the foundational element of all this, a spirit. So let's not be naive. Somebody somewhere is feverishly looking to merge the power of AI with the pursuit of answers in creating this 21st century Frankenstein. And at that point, it's get ready for cut 5. It's hello Skynet.
I'll be back.
And just like Arnold's going to be back, I'll be back too. We're going to take a break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson with you.
.30 on the dot this Thursday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Tennesseans among 120 million Americans under some sort of heat advisory and air quality alert. Full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. The U.S. Supreme Court is gutting affirmative action programs in college admissions today. The court said in a 6-3 opinion, the programs at Harvard and North Carolina violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment by admitting students based on their race rather than a student's individual qualities. And another Supreme Court decision today could have widespread impacts on American employers. The court sided with a Christian postal worker who was fired for refusing to work on Sundays based on his faith. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. One of the things you hear me talk about frequently on my radio show that has been going for over 20 years in the Nashville market is that annuity sales are not necessarily a great thing for the end investor. Now, if you go to an investment firm, a lot of times you'll get that. The first thing that they recommend, an annuity. Banks and investment firms recommend these for one really good reason. And many times that reason isn't the best thing for you. It's commissions. It's a huge moneymaker for the investing industry. This is why I think it's so important that when you work with an investment advisor, that they not be paid on commission. It creates a huge conflict because it creates an incentive to sell you things that may not be in your best interest. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. We don't do anything on commissions. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
After some of what we're unpacking this morning, I would not be surprised if some of you are not okay either. But I do love this song, though. You know, my oldest son and I, we kind of share a lot of background. He played in a band and toured at like a really early age, like 10, 11, 12. But, you know, all through his sort of middle school and high school years, you know, we kind of had a shared music collection. You know, we both like loved the same thing. And his, you know, when he came off the road and decided to go to college full time, his like freshman year at Vanderbilt, he had this My Chem like hoodie that he wore constantly, with the hood kind of pulled up over his head, kind of down over his face. And but at the same time, if I could have gotten away with that, I would, because I love this band, love this song.
I love this song.
This is still one of my. Every once in a while, I'll be working or something, and like, I need to hear I'm Not Okay, and I'm going to play the uncensored version. You know what I mean? Na 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 boo boo. You know, but great song. So and we're gonna open up. Well, we actually did open up the phone lines. I just sort of talked straight through it, but we're going to open up the phone lines for a bit, for the rest of this segment till we get to the top of the hour. And I want to remind you again, and by the way, you know, anything we've covered this morning, you know, if you want to call, you got a thought on it, especially, you know, I want to hear this whole issue of kind of the confluence between AI and synthetic humans. I mean, is anybody, and I realize we're jumping the gun because, you know, Freak Out Friday's tomorrow. But is anybody freaked out by this? Anyway, so call in, let us hear what you have to say. But I do want to remind you that we have a special guest in the next hour that is going to be on air with us. And Chief Beck, again, 20 years as a Navy SEAL, 13 deployments, including 7 combat deployments. You know, he was first a member of SEAL Team 1, completed that training, which is not simple, but then later a member of SEAL Team 6, multiple, you know, military awards, decorations, including the Bronze Star, Purple Heart. So, and you know, he's been interviewed by, you know, all the big names, all that stuff. But he and I connected. We've kind of become friends through a mutual friend, and I asked him if he'd come on and just talk to us about his experience. I don't want to steal his thunder too much, but there's a very interesting kind of a twist after kind of that foundational background to where the road took him after he retired from the military. So we're going to have him on at the top of the hour. Looking forward to it. In the meantime, so Mac, here's the thing. And actually one of the things that Elon Musk at least used to talk about was every human being having like an actual, like a physical avatar, and utilizing AI, kind of depositing their consciousness in this avatar, because it would be, you know, wouldn't be susceptible to illness and those kinds of things, which is, you know, that's the wacky side of Elon. There's the lovable sort of libertarian Elon, and then there's the what in the world have you been smoking Elon? There's that Elon. But Mac, what do you think about the implications of this? I mean, what's your take on it?
Ooh, I think there's pros and cons to in a lot of things like this, you know, but we look back on like computers and social media and those effects that we've now gotten to experience over the last, 20 years or so. And there's a lot of pros, there's a lot of cons. I think that with AI too, I'd be worried most with artificial intelligence as a whole, with just people losing their jobs. Yeah. That's my biggest concern. Is just people don't get to work anymore because AI can do their job better and faster and more efficient and without the mistakes.
And that's happening. I mean, that's already happening, and it's going to happen more. See, here's the thing for me. Here's the thing about AI, and the CEO of Google, Sundar, I can't remember his last name, but this was several months back. he actually spoke very candidly in an interview about the fact that, the AI that they were developing, because this stuff is still kind of subject to like high school rivalry mentality, where, one guy's, multi-billion-dollar tech concern releases this thing or that thing, and then everybody rushes to release their own version. And so, Google obviously working on their AI, because the chat thing caught people completely off guard.
The Chat GPT.
Yeah. Its sort of growth curve so dwarfed anything that had come before it. I mean, ridiculously so, that it even just kind of scared them and caught them off guard. But Google, in trying to, get in and catch up, Sundar admitted that their AI had like taught itself a language.
Whoa.
And that wasn't anything that their developers or programmers had initiated.
Gosh.
But here's the thing. His response to it was, and we really don't know how that happened.
Whoa.
Those are not the words that I want to hear.
Oh, no.
Because that's some Skynet stuff right there. Well, we really did. Because he said, and I'm as close to quoting him as I can, well, it's kind of like this black box. All right, so hold up, home slice. You're telling me you built the dadgum black box, but the stuff that goes on inside the black box, you just you kind of don't know and can't control. So here are my issues, and it is funny. It's life imitating art, because that was the whole premise of the Terminator films. That was the whole premise of Skynet and that whole kind of storyline. That what if AI develops itself? What if it comes to this point where it gets its own traction and then deduces that mankind is flawed, which it is, and that really mankind has done a horrible job of managing and controlling itself thus far, and we just need to step in and we need to change the storyline and change the timeline. Now, when the head of Google makes statements like, well, we really don't know how that happened. We don't know how our AI taught itself a language, that we didn't teach it. So, I mean, there are the practical implications of, jobs being lost, a massive impact on, economies, not just the economy here, but economies. But there are also the implications, the potential downside implications of a runaway technology. And not to be overly dramatic or melodramatic or monochromatic or anything else. The reality is these things are already taking place with AI as it exists. And we're talking about trillions and trillions and trillions of files of data and growing exponentially all the time. Well, the nature of it is to grow. The nature of it is to increase. The nature of it is to expand. So as long as that's, good stuff, and just pictures of people that don't exist, and, the Beatles songs that were never written, then everybody's cool. But at the point where, if the point is reached, where the capacity of the created outstrips the ability of the creator to control and keep in check, then I'm thinking of Mike Tyson. Then I'm thinking everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, because that's kind of what we come down to. So you take that and you roll into it this other piece now of you got these other wacky kids working on synthetic human beings. So like I said earlier, somebody somewhere right now, probably with George Soros' money, is working on taking the peanut butter and the chocolate and putting them together. So that's a whole other thing. And it's like, I'm sorry. I hope that I'm not frightening anyone, but at the same time, I kind of hope I am. Because as clear thinkers, we really should kind of keep, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps ahead in terms of the things, not the things that we fear, but the things that we think through. Prayerfully, mind you, because of the fact that, I've talked about this before. There are people who make things happen. There are people who watch things happen, and then there are people who look up dumbfounded and go, what happened? Clear thinkers should never be in that latter category, ever. All right, on that cheery note, Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson, aren't you glad I'm back? We'll be right back in a minute.
All of Middle Tennessee placed under a severe thunderstorm watch. This is until 4 o'clock, so conditions are going to be ripe for storms to pop up and the potential that they go severe through about 4 o'clock today. Now, that's on top of the air quality alert and the heat alert that all of Middle Tennessee is under right now as well. And with little time to go before they recess, the U.S. Supreme Court today is handing down some decisions. One of them guts the use of affirmative action. The other one might be interesting to Christians who don't like working on Sundays. We'll tell you about it at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
A lot going on.
It's busy.
Between the weather and some of the other stuff, I think Morgan Freeman may be president before the week's out. We'll see. Whenever there's a disaster, Morgan's going to be made president. It's going to happen. But anyway, so again, I just want to quickly remind us that in the third hour, I'm going to be joined by a friend of mine, a guy named Chief Beck, 20-year veteran of the Navy SEALs. Stellar career, 13 deployments, 7 in combat, etc. Actually a member of SEAL Team 6. Told Anderson Cooper in an interview that he wanted to be a SEAL because they were the toughest of the tough. So upon retiring from the service, and again, we're going to hear his story directly from him. He transitioned from man to woman. And for several years lived as a woman. But then subsequently detransitioned. And presently his life and his message have to do with that, fairly amazing and atypical journey. So he's going to be on with us in the third hour. So we've been in such heavy, and even the weather is what in the wide world of sports is going on. So I just thought maybe we just all need a hug. So we're gonna go to a story just for the next few minutes that's a little bit lighter and a little bit more a sympathetic pop culture character that we all know and love. Vanna White, co-host of Wheel of Fortune. I think Vanna must be about 193 years old by now because she's been on TV for a minute. But Vanna White, co-host of Wheel of Fortune, has reportedly hired a powerful attorney. Why, you ask? News of White's decision to lawyer up came days before Sony Pictures announced that Ryan Seacrest, who is the new Dick Clark, would assume the position as host of the popular game show upon Pat Sajak's retirement, which evidently is imminent, rather. According to Puck News, I have no idea what that is.
What? Puck News.
Is that a hockey thing or just a bad joke? I don't know what that is. Today, Puck News. Okay. White hired attorney Brian Friedman, whose high-profile client list includes Tucker Carlson. He's making some money with Tucker right now. Megyn Kelly, Gabrielle Union, Chris Harrison, and other TV personalities. His specialty is resolving conflicts between talents and the networks that employed them. And he will reportedly help White negotiate her new contract and a better salary amid allegations of pay discrimination. So evidently the deal with Vanna is that she has not had a raise. Quote, White hasn't had a raise in 18 years. Yes, 18 years. She got some bonuses along the way, but never a straight pay increase. Now, on one hand, that was a choice. You could have left and tried the free agent market, but, I know she's hardly a ditch digger or a school bus driver, but given her longevity and profile and the increased value of the Wheel asset to Sony, that seems nuts to me. So not only has White not received a salary increase in 18 years, but she earns $3 million a year compared to Sajak's reported salary of $15 million a year. It's not yet known what Seacrest will earn. So I guess, this is one of those areas where it applies whether you stand in front of a wheel and turn letters over or, whatever it is you do. If you stay on for what they're paying you, is it the fault of the employer for not paying you more? Or was that your deal because you decided to stay? And right there, we should play If You Want Me to Stay. But anyway, it's just one of those things to think about. It's not as weighty or as heady as AI or synthetic humans or crime in New York City, but it's a common kind of a topic because of the fact that, are we owed a job or are we fortunate to be employed? Have we developed value and we're worth the value that we create for our employer and therefore we monetize the value we develop? Or, is a widget a widget? Much to think about. Again, we got Chief Beck on with us in the third hour. Coming up, we're rounding the clubhouse turn. Dez Dickerson, Super Talk 99 WTN. We'll be right back.
$11 o'clock on the dot this Thursday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. All of Middle Tennessee has just been placed under a severe thunderstorm watch. This runs until 4 o'clock this afternoon. And that means that conditions are ripe for storms to start popping up and the potential they could go severe. Right now, there is severe weather north of Nashville. Got it right now in south central Kentucky. Got some severe thunderstorm warnings in effect near Bowling Green. Tennesseans are among 120 million Americans under some sort of heat alert and air quality alert today, too. You've got smoke from Canada wildfires mixing with the heat and humidity, making Middle Tennessee air, that is, unhealthy for people with lung and heart disease. And with little time to go before they recess, the U.S. Supreme Court today gutted the use of affirmative action in college admissions.
In a 6-3 opinion, the U.S. Supreme Court said admissions programs at Harvard and the University of North Carolina employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. The decision said the court has never permitted admissions programs to work in that way. Students for Fair Admissions, which brought the case, called the opinion the beginning of the restoration of the colorblind legal covenant that binds the nation. In dissent, Justice Sotomayor said the decision rolls back decades of momentous progress and entrenches racial inequality in education. Aaron Katursky, ABC News, New York.
And the Supreme Court voted unanimously to pave the way for more religious accommodations in the workplace. They ruled in favor of a Christian postal worker from Pennsylvania who didn't want to work on Sundays in order to observe the Sabbath. Gerald Groff was disciplined for skipping shifts and ultimately lost his job. This decision gives him a chance to get his job back, and more broadly, it raises the bar for when employers can legally refuse to accommodate employees' religious practices. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
the original Fleetwood Mac. Back when they had 3 guitar players. And they were actually I think the Fleetwood Mac Blues Band. One of the greatest lines ever written in rock and roll, the opening lines of the song. I'm just going to let the fade go so we can just barely hear it.
I can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin.
I love it. Can't help it by the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. See, that kind of self-honesty doesn't exist in rock and roll anymore. But I digress. All right, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We are headed into the third hour. And you know, as I've mentioned multiple times, it's great to be back with my voice back. It's getting a little tired. I'm getting a little hoarse, but that's all right because I was a lot hoarse last week. And I'm just having fun. It's more fun than playing in water. Sounds like we're all going to be playing in water before the day is over, but that's a whole other thing. So, as I mentioned, we got a special guest in this hour. I'm happy to have him, a mutual friend introduced us a while back, and we're getting to know one another. I consider him a friend. And, you know, I've shared his bio with you a little bit, and I'm going to let him kind of share some of that himself when he comes on. But suffice it to say, just a storied career as a 20-year veteran of the Navy SEALs. And, you know, for me, the thing that matters most is the opportunity to share people's stories, have them share their stories, and for that to be kind of their call. You know, a lot of times, and I, you know, as you know, I'm not really a broadcast professional in the truest sense of the word. I'm kind of a commentator and a communicator and a knucklehead that can sit in front of a mic and have some things to say. But I think sometimes, you know, we can treat people with a story as a commodity. And I just don't think that's right. Because the thing that matters to me most is people and getting to know people. And as I say, come around to their side of the table, see what they see and understand what they understand. So we're going to go ahead and, are we set, Mac? Are we good? We're going to go ahead and, all right, we're going to bring on Chief Beck. Chief, how you doing today, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, thanks.
Man, that's good. So are you in North Dakota? Is that where you are right now, or what part of the fruited plain are you on right now?
I'm in Western New York, south of Buffalo.
Ah, okay. See, my wife is from upstate New York, and I've actually spent quite a bit of time in Buffalo over the years. And
yeah,
you know, but my wife,
people don't understand how big New York is, or how wide open farmland it is. It's amazing.
Exactly.
So New York City is this one little tiny corner on the bottom. It's actually closer to New Jersey than New York. You know, New York City. I wish we could cut that whole section of the state off, because New York City is so different than the rest of New York. It just destroys the whole state.
It's funny. We just did a segment about New York and kind of quoted all the crime statistics and kind of what's happened in this window of time since some folks were brought into power, the DA there and some others. It is crazy. Yep. And it is a big state, and it is a beautiful state. Like I said, my wife's from upstate, and she grew up in farm country. She grew up in a little town. And,
heck yeah, it's all farm country out here.
Oh,
we're surrounded by farmers that we work with, and we go to farmers markets, and we eat fresh food almost every day.
That's
great.
We
almost don't do processed food.
That's awesome. So thanks for coming on.
That's the key to survival, you know.
Well, I think it is that, and don't live in any of the 5 boroughs, because that's tough to survive.
Yeah.
But thanks again for coming on, and I just wanted to, like I said, just kind of give an opportunity for you to share your story. I've shared a little bit of the background and so on, but I just really what matters most to me is you having the opportunity to share your story, however you want to share your story. So,
Yeah.
so
I've been given ample opportunities to share my story.
I'm sure you have, because it's
I'm
a
getting
unique
tired of
story.
saying it.
I'm sure you are. And maybe this will be the last time. And next time we get together, we'll talk about fresh food and Buffalo. And we can talk about the Goo Goo Dolls, I have a Buffalo Goo Goo Doll story, but for another time.
Oh, cool. Nice.
So, I mean, in your words, what is the Chief Beck story? I mean, in your words.
Well, the Chief Beck story, I would say it's a combination of Job, and the prodigal son, and, Simon Peter, the zealot, or Simon the zealot.
I got you.
And I'm bringing up a lot of Bible stuff.
And those are pretty big Bible characters. I mean, those are not like,
Oh,
obscure characters.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like Job, was just tested immensely, to see if he would keep coming back to, worshiping God no matter what he went through, And I started out, my life on a farm in, way western Pennsylvania near Lake Erie. And, it was a pretty good growing up in the 1960s and 70s. And I grew up as a Christian, in a Christian household. And I was also raised in Christian schools. And so during math class, they were teaching the Bible. During history, it was the Bible. During, science, it was the Bible. It was almost opposite of what's going on today.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in math class today, it's like 2 + 2 = gender equality.
Mm-hmm.
If you do the algebraic equation of some trigonometry, it's equal to diversity and inclusion. So they've taken almost opposite of how we used to teach it. They used to do the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. Every morning I would do the pledge, and then we start teaching class. Things were based on morals and a moral compass, the 10 Commandments, and these are the different things that we're learning along with our actual classes. It was not quite like indoctrination, but it was definitely heavy Bible within other studies, but it wasn't twisted,
Yeah.
And I just think that now they're taking all this gender equality and diversity and everything else, and it's just twisted to the point when you don't even recognize it anymore. Equality's gone over so far that the people that think they're oppressed are now the actual oppressors.
Exactly.
And I'm starting this whole show off, and I'm not sure if I right now am. But I identified, self-identified with, a lot of professional help by psychologists and doctors. I self-identified as transgender.
So let's back up for just a second, just to give, so the audience can have the kind of the linearity of it. So you came from this traditional background, farm kid.
Yes.
And then in between, kind of the part of the story that you're talking about, you were in the military and in the military for a number of years. You weren't in for 18 months and then bounced out. So
yes, 20 years as a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
And I did a pretty good job in the Navy SEALs, and I guess they measure that by, I don't know, I think SEALs, we measure it differently than just by ribbons and medals and stuff. We measure it by deployments, and so I ended up going over 13 times, and so you figure the guys have a lot of deployments like that. They're always being requested to go on assignments. And so there's a few times that I was personally requested to go do special assignments, because I was an expert in my field.
Mm-hmm.
And my field in the SEAL teams was more like the CIA type work. It was the breaking and entering and installing bugs and cameras and audio stuff. And I was doing all the, they call it second story work. They call it black bag work.
Mm-hmm.
You're called a plumber. There's a bunch of different names that you can be called in those kind of jobs. But for the plumbing type jobs, I was called in for that stuff.
The stuff
and
that all the cool movies are made about.
Yeah, this Jason Bourne crap. Except it's weird because Jason Bourne is able to do all the techie stuff and fight. Really hard to do both because you have to. I specialize so deep in this technology. But I majored when I was in college at Virginia Military Institute. I was majoring in electrical engineering, so I had a very deep technical background. I was in ham radio club when I was in high school, and I did all that stuff just because I liked it,
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got in the SEALs, I'm a SEAL, kicking the doors in and doing the running around and, run a marathon with 40 pounds on your back and then go into a mission. That's our job, and that's what we're most famous for, I think, is doing these really long, hardcore missions.
Oh, yeah.
So I do all that stuff, but I'm also technical,
Mm-hmm.
I also have all the engineering background and very precise engineering. And, hey, babe, mama's barking. Our mama dog just had 12 puppies 2 days ago.
Whew.
So,
and
she
needs a break. She needs a spa
Yes,
day.
I might get a couple of interruptions right now. So
That's all
sorry
right.
about that.
So let's do this.
So very technical.
So let's go back to.
Sorry.
So how did you go from that guy to someone or more than one someone convincing you that what you needed was to transition? How did that come about?
Okay, so anybody listening right now, just go on Google right now and Google Kristen Beck, KRSTINBECK, and you'll see bearded pictures. You'll see pictures of me in a dress. You'll see, all the pictures from the last whatever years. So if you look at me when I'm all bearded up and I'm doing the SEAL team stuff, that was 20 years of me immersed in SEAL teams, but I didn't really have a chance to think about my own self, so to self-identify as anything. I was a SEAL. That was it. This is my job, and I did it 24/7 all the time and nonstop. That's why I became a good SEAL, because I was working really hard at it. So for 20 years, it wasn't really that big of a thought. Once in a while, I would think about who I was, and I think it's something that all of us need to do, to sit in a quiet place and meditate and pray and just ask yourself the question, who am I? And if you can answer that, and you can also figure out, who is God? And you can answer that, and the final question is why? Why are we here? So I started this little group called Diogenes Club, and Diogenes was quite a character. If you want to look up somebody really wild, he's a philosopher from way back in the Greek days. But Diogenes was a character, and that's kind of the thought patterns that we need to start having is like Diogenes. He held up this lantern looking for truth. He'd hold the lantern, just a lamp, in men's eyes, women's eyes. He'd hold it up to your eyes and look at you, stare at you with his light. And all he was doing is looking at you to see if you're truthful or not, looking for the truth. And I think that's what we need to do today.
So,
we have to look for the truth.
So
but
initially,
the truth is within
though,
all of us.
Initially that search.
Me.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that because you've come to that. And you've come, I don't want to call it full circle, but to something that looks a lot more like the way you were brought up. But how did...
That's like the story goes. Is like when I was a kid, though, I didn't get a whole lot of love in the household.
Okay.
And so you have to figure that there's, and I've been going over a lot of the stuff, the trifectas, the trinities, the what do they call it? The Nostradamus used to always doing cryptographs. So I had a pretty huge awakening earlier this year. I was doing some massive fasting, and I had visions, and I had prophecies, and I saw things that are beyond this world, and it's called knowledge of the third kind. I think that's Spinoza, or is it Kant? Can't remember. But knowledge of the third kind is what I received. I received things that were just like beyond what I would normally be able to think about.
So that's the present stuff. So that's
what graph right now you got to think about is love.
Right.
If you have a kid who's grown up, you need three types of love. You need your motherly love, and that's the creation, to take care of you, always love. That's mother's love. Every child needs that. If that's held back from a child, it's going to have to be filled in with something else.
Mm-hmm.
And another type of love you have when you get older is when you meet a partner and you get married. That's intimate love. It's a totally different type of love than motherly love. Mm-hmm. Then you also have your final love, which is just love, and that's the love that God gives us. Now, if you think about that final love, which you just call love, it doesn't need a precursor to it. It doesn't need motherly love. It's love. Motherly love is a subsection, a fractal of God's love. Intimate love is a fractal, is a piece of God's love.
So let me ask you this.
You can think about this with identity also. When you think about transgender, the word gender is who I am. They start sticking this word before it, cisgender. It's total buffoonery. This term gender is what you apply to all humankind, gender, male and female. When you start saying transgender, if you want to have a subsection, a fractal of what real gender is and separate yourself off from gender, male and female, then go for it. You're going to have a prefix, and we'll call it transgender. If you want to be transgender, that's a subsection. It's a fractal. It's not the real gender. Just like when you talk about love of God, the motherly love is a fractal, is a subsection of the real love that you're search for. The motherly love, you can survive without it. The intimate love, you can survive without it. But God's love, you cannot survive without God's love.
So let me jump in because I want to make sure, with the brief amount of time we have, I want to make sure we get as much of a sort of a full picture of this for the listeners as we can. So through your experience.
When I was a kid, I was not given motherly love. When I was a kid,
Gotcha.
I searched for it somewhere else. I searched through it through myself, and that's called autogynephilia.
Mm-hmm.
It's also called gender dysphoria. It's also called trauma. It's called anxiety. It's called depression.
Gotcha.
It's called adjustment disorder. It's called, I can go through the entire DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychological Mental Health. This is called the DSM. DSM-5 is what they're using right now, but psychology and psychologists have warped the DSM out of context where words don't really mean what they're supposed to mean anymore. They made anxiety, depression, gender dysphoria, autogynephilia, eating disorders. They made all of these disorders, if you're a kid, all of these disorders will equal surgery, because they want to surgery all these kids. They want to be giving them drugs. They want to have them castrated as children. They want to give them all these drugs and all these surgeries, but as soon as you give them these puberty blockers for the first 6 months, it's going to affect that kid to the point where that kid will have to be on puberty blockers for the rest of their lives.
So,
in the end of their life, that's over $10 million
yeah.
in the lifetime of that child. But they have an automatic prescription to ching all those pharmaceuticals and all those doctors, all the other people getting kickbacks, $10 million per kid if they can get them on the puberty blockers. If they get them to do one surgery takes 4 hours. That surgery is $400,000 to ching in the pockets of hospitals and doctors.
So we're gonna have to go to a break. Hang on.
It's about real gender. It's about real health.
Absolutely.
It's not healthcare.
Absolutely.
This is what I want to talk about.
So here's what we're going to do.
I went through all this stuff as an adult. I'm an adult. I went through this. I got tricked.
Yeah.
So if they can trick a 45-year-old Navy SEAL, 20-year Navy SEAL, they can trick me. What do you think they're doing to kids?
And that's what I want to talk about when we come back from the break.
There's an 8,000% increase in non-binary kids in one school. 8,000% increase. How is that even possible?
It's crazy. We're going to talk about that when we come back from the break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be right back.
All of Middle Tennessee now under a severe thunderstorm watch. That is in addition to the excessive heat warning and the air quality alert. However, the air quality is improving. And Supreme Court decisions today impact college admissions policies and employers with employees who don't want to work on Sundays. Hear these stories more at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
We're on with Chief Beck, 20-year Navy SEAL. And man, thanks so much for coming on with us. And, I apologize. The nature of radio is we've got like a very sort of a segmented, we got to do this, and then we got to take breaks. So I apologize for having to jump in. But
hey, can I apologize to you? I thought we only had like 5 or 10 minutes, so I was talking really fast and trying to get a lot of stuff out. I apologize. I'm going to slow down.
No problem. Originally, we were only going to do a small segment, but I have the ability to make those decisions. Yeah. We're going to keep going. So here's what I want to know, because you mentioned something that I think is critically important and important for us all to know. As a 45-year-old man, you said that they convinced you, they tricked you. How did they do that?
Well, here's how this whole thing works. I mentioned when I was growing up, I had a lot of trauma. I also had a lack of intimacy from my mother and love and all that. So I was pretty much alone. I was isolated. If someone is isolated, they become very vulnerable. And so I was in a very vulnerable position. Also, my growing up, because it was in such a really hardcore bubble of a Christian environment, we never got the birds and the bees talk. I never got anything. I didn't know anything about anything when it comes to like sex or anything. So I was, the first time I had like a wet dream, I don't know how else to put it, I think I was like 17 or 18. I was old. I was much older. I was like a junior in high school, and I was a virgin until I was like 23 years old. So all of this stuff scared the heck out of me. So because I didn't know what was going on, I was very naive, and I just stayed in that bubble, And so being isolated and having such a confusion about sex and sexuality and gender, because it's all combined into one thing when you really get down to it. So at that time, that's when the door was opened to Satan, because I got dressed up once with one of my sister's outfits, and we were just playing, just being silly kids. This is when I was really young, and I got praised for that. I got love bombed. So my sisters were like, "Oh my God, it's so much fun! It's so cute!" All that. And so if you have a kid who's isolated and already living through trauma and already living through a lack of love, if that's the only love they get, that's the love they will pursue.
Sure.
And so I'm pursuing this type of weird love, just in affection and validation, that I was actually worthy and validated. I was getting that, but it was all misplaced.
So who was it
I kept that in the back of my mind.
Who was it that first came to you and suggested to you, "Hey, here's what you need"? How did that come about?
I'm still talking about when I was a kid. So
no, I understand.
The seed is planted.
Right.
So the seed is planted when you're a kid. And this is why it's so dangerous to have these drag queens, all these books, these pornographic books in kids' libraries at elementary schools. This is the age I was when I was exposed to gender, non-binary gender, cross-gender, cross-dressing, all that stuff.
I got you.
And it was connected to sexual arousement. And so the dopamine was released in my brain when a sexual arousement occurred. It occurred while I was dressed up, and then that exacerbated. It is a complement. It made a complementary behavior that the dopamine and the pleasure centers were all lit off only when I did that.
Got it.
It was not lit off any other time.
Got it. So
now I'm in high school, I'm confused. Then I go to college, I'm confused.
Right.
Then I go into Navy because I want to shut this down. I want to totally cut. I want to kill it. I know it's a demon. It's this evil stuff. It's not me. So I go into Navy SEALs and I shut it down for 20 years.
So you just focused in on being a SEAL for 20 years.
Yeah, SEAL Team 6.
Gotcha.
I got up to the top team.
Absolutely.
And I got there not because I volunteered, but because they called me up and asked me. So, and they didn't ask me because I'm like this physical stud. And most guys at that team, they are physical studs. They are just beyond. It's beyond Olympic athletes. I'll tell you what.
So who was it that came to you? And I'm sorry, because we're burning through time.
After I got done with the SEALs, I was 20 years, I retired. I was like, hey, I got some time off. I can do whatever I want. And so I started thinking about my childhood. I started thinking about my life. I started thinking about everything. So I got dressed up again. And I was getting dressed up periodically here once in a while and do that. But when I got closer to retirement, in the 2009-10, I was almost retired. I was done, and I knew I was done. So I started experimenting, doing a little bit more than I ever would have normally. I also had a little bit of help by an ex-girlfriend. if you're love bombed and you're told to do it and you're praised while you're doing it, you're gonna do it more because you want that dopamine rush. It also gives you some DMT and some other stuff. So I got into that trap. So I got trapped into a pleasure trap. It's pleasure and lust. None of it is love. None of it is happiness, true happiness. It's pleasure, and pleasure is not happiness. Lust is not love. And so this is a trap they lay for you. And so I got fully into it. And once I came out, SEAL Team 6, transgender, all this stuff, blah, 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 everybody wanted a piece of me. And so I was getting phone calls and news media, everybody. And I always kept saying, no, 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 I don't want to be in the news. Finally, Anderson Cooper called me up, and he flew down to see me at my house in 2013 or 14. So then everything exploded. Then the book came out, and a bunch of other crap happened, and a movie happened, and now I'm fully immersed. It's kind of like what happens to people in Hollywood. They do one little evil thing, and next thing you know, they're covering up their eye, and they're starting to do satanic gestures or throwing symbols all over. Next thing you know, they go from this goody two-shoe boy into this transgender wackadoodles during a Super Bowl. You know, it happens. When you open that door just a little bit, the devil gets in there. You know, and I'm not saying it's a devil. You don't have to look at it like the devil, but you can look at it as something that's not right. It's something that's off. It's something that's not the norm. And this transgenderism, it's only like 1% to 2% of the nation. But right now in grade schools, in elementary schools, and high schools, it's growing up to 40% of these schools are non-binary, transgender.
And I want to bring us back to this point. I'm sorry, we're on a hard break, but I want to come back to how you detransitioned after you've shared this with us.
That's probably the most important point.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be right back.
$11:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Tracking some severe thunderstorms now almost to the Tennessee line, pounding south central Kentucky. Bowling Green is involved in that. It's prompting severe thunderstorm warnings there in south central Kentucky. Now, as a result, all of Middle Tennessee is under a severe thunderstorm watch until 4 o'clock today. That's on top of the excessive heat warning, also the air quality alert due to smoke from Canada wildfires mixing with the heat and humidity. It's unhealthy for sensitive groups who have lung or heart diseases. Affirmative action as we know it is gone. The U.S. Supreme Court this morning ruling 6-3, limiting the use of race in college admissions to an individual basis, meaning applicants can include the impact of overcoming adversity or racial discrimination in essays or personal statements, but that race cannot be the only reason. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. One of the things you hear me talk about frequently on my radio show that has been going for over 20 years in the Nashville market is that annuity sales are not necessarily a great thing for the end investor. Now, if you go to an investment firm, a lot of times you'll get that. The first thing that they recommend, an annuity. Banks and investment firms recommend these for one really good reason. And many times that reason isn't the best thing for you. It's commissions. It's a huge moneymaker for the investing industry. This is why I think it's so important that when you work with an investment advisor, that they not be paid on commission. It creates a huge conflict because it creates an incentive to sell you things that may not be in your best interest. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. We don't do anything on commissions. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
one of the best bass lines ever written. Just, saying. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson with you. We have Chief Beck with us, and again, man, we so appreciate your time. So, what I want to get to though, because I know where you are now, and I think I have a sense of what your message. And we've heard some of what your message is right now, and that from that place of experience, sounding the alarm. But I want to know how you went from that place to then pivoting and detransitioning, because for you, that light, that epiphany, that change, however you would frame it, there was a point where you said, "Wait a minute," and like I said, so go ahead and share that with us.
Okay, so you see that it was a lack of motherly love. It's a lack of intimate love. It's a lack of recognizing love and even the love of God. So I was totally vacant. I was isolated, and I didn't have any of that coming in. So I turned to anywhere else I could get it from, and that was offered to me through the LGBT community and transgenderism. So then I got all the love bombed. It was not real love. This is all fake love.
Mm-hmm.
So I recognized that because I had a woman come in my life who was showing me unconditional love, like real, true love. And I've never really had that before in my life. I've had love, but it wasn't the same. And so when I started seeing that, I started understanding what love is, and then she started challenging me about all of my preconceived notions. She challenged me on gender. She's a Bachelor of Arts and Studies in Women and Gender Studies, biology and psychology, and a bunch of other stuff. So she's an expert in this stuff. But she didn't do what all the other psychologists did or all the other mental health counselors did. She didn't just say, okay, you have anxiety, depression, PTSD, and all this other stuff, and we're just going to call it surgery and transgender. So she didn't take all the other illnesses, all the other mental health issues, and just stick them to the side and say it's transgender. And this is what's happening right now within the psychological community. They're taking a whole bunch of other mental health issues, and they're wrapping them all up in this tiny little package that requires surgery and pharmaceuticals. Now, if you have anxiety, you don't need surgery. If you have eating disorders, you don't need surgery. If you have any other mental health issue, you don't need surgery or drugs. So, and that's the key factor for everybody to understand. The only time you will need a lot of drugs and a lot of surgery and continued patient forever, given the medical industry $10 to $100 million per person, maybe not $100 million, but darn it, it's a lot. So it's through transgenderism. So this is about money. And so I had someone show me all of the reasons why this is not love, this is this, this is this, this is this, and even went through the cult. So she's an expert in cults also. And so she was going from the religious side of how this is becoming a cult. So gender ideology is a full-blown cult. If you don't believe that, look up cult and study why is a cult a cult. And you will see that this month-long of celebration of Pride Month is part of the cult dynamics. So I started talking about detransitioning, and they excommunicated me from their cult. I am now hated, and I get death threats from all kinds of rainbow people. Right. Unbelievable. It's way worse than I ever got. Like they say that Christians are so hateful. I've yet to meet a hateful Christian. I don't meet them. All they keep talking about is Jesus and turning the other cheek and love. Love that neighbor as you would love yourself. Hey, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with gay culture or queer culture or transgender. I don't agree with any of it now. Zero. But I still love them. I still love them because I know what the love of God means, and I know what maternal and intimate love is, and that's how I got to God's love. So this woman gave me a glimpse at unconditional love. When I started seeing that, I started remembering as a childhood all those Bible verses that I memorized. Then I started reading the Bible again. I started seeing it. Then I started going to church again. And I met a great preacher who preaches only the Bible. It's a Bible church. It's been operating now for over 20 years. If you can find a Bible church with more than 50 members that's been operating more than 10 years, go to it. Go to it immediately because they are teaching the Bible and they're teaching truth. And they're not pulling punches because they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. It's like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm going to hurt some people's feelings because I'm going to tell you the truth. Sometimes the truth hurts.
That's true.
And the truth will set you free.
Well, here's the thing.
A lot of truth.
The Bible says that, speaking of God the Father, whom the Father loves, he chastens. And that word chastening isn't, go and sit in the corner, time out for 5 minutes. That's a serious word. So it was unconditional love.
God's love is what I found, and God's love is what actually saved me through an intimate, unconditional love with Courtney, my fiance.
Wow.
So she started the ball rolling. So you can't. It's really, really hard to do this from scratch.
Sure.
And so that's why the psychological community is really messing up right now. They could really be helping a lot of people, except they're turning to pharmaceuticals and surgery. If they would just turn to love, they would sit across from a patient, from a client, and just saying, hey, look, whatever's going on, just know, everything I'm going to tell you is coming from a place of love. I love you in the spirit of God. I love you in the spirit of who we are as humans. We're equal.
So
let's talk.
Let me ask you this, because we've only got a few more minutes, and I just want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to share this part of it. So what is your message? And I think we've kind of heard it as we've gone through here. What's your message to those that are being advised, directed, and maybe pressured to take the path that you took?
So my biggest message is we are right now in two camps. We are divided camps, and it divided right down political parties. It divided down conservative versus liberal, Republican versus Democrat, even racial lines and all kinds of lines. They're trying purposely to divide this country, divide and conquer. They want us fighting ourselves. And they're doing this by gender. They're doing this by race. They're doing it by sexuality. They're doing this by families. Right now, almost my entire family does not talk to me. They have banned my number. They have blocked me. I don't even talk to most of them anymore. I'm going so hardcore with my message from Jesus, my message from God, because I know this is true. You can find yourself again if you are lost by simply looking for love. If you look for love, that means you are open to love. If you're open to love, you will receive love. This is the message. If you're open to drugs, you're going to find drugs. If you're open to surgery, you're going to find surgery. What I want you to think about is that we are divided. If all you're doing is looking at the Democrats, liberal, this agenda, that's all you're going to find. If all you're looking at is conservative, Republican, and that agenda, that is all you're going to find. I implore you to look at both sides. Look at all the data. Look at your neighbor, whether they're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter. They're your neighbor. Treat them as your neighbor first, and don't worry about the labels. Treat your neighbor as your neighbor and love your neighbor. Forget the labels. And when you start offering that love, they will return the love, and it will return tenfold.
That's awesome.
If you're looking to heal yourself, if you're looking for healing, you will find healing. So stop looking for the bad stuff. Stop looking for drugs. Stop looking for pharmaceuticals. Stop looking for a Band-Aid. Band-Aids do not exist. They don't help. You need that wound to be wide open, and you need to talk about the wound. You need to give it air. That wound needs to be exposed. You need to talk about it. If you want to talk about it to me, if you want to talk about it on social media, if you want to talk about it by somebody you trust, go to your preacher, go to a psychologist, go to your parents, go to your mom or your dad, go to a brother or sister. Go to somebody you trust and just talk to them, and you're going to start finding love. You'll start finding compassion, and then you will start finding healing. You will never be healed by pharmaceuticals. They want you to be a forever patient. You will never be healed by surgery. They want a forever patient. They want money. I'm not telling you that they're all evil. They're not all evil. But darn it, we're starting to see that a lot of them want money so badly they will surgery you. They will do operations on you that you don't need.
So if you go much longer, we're going to have to receive an offering here.
Okay.
We're gonna
don't ever give me anything. Don't ever.
No. I'm joking.
Follow me.
No, I'm
just telling you right now. I don't want anyone following me. All I want you to follow is Jesus. I want you to look at the Bible. I want you to look at both sides of the equation. Look at the Republican messages. Look at the Democrat messages. Because the truth is in the middle. I'm telling you right now. Do not follow me. Don't give me anything. I don't want anything.
No,
I want nothing.
And I appreciate
that. Look
that.
at Jesus.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah,
and the passion of what you're saying is, it's self-evident. And again, really appreciate you coming on today. And it's something that, people need to hear, because here's the thing. The messages that people do hear via, the sort of, media megaphones, at times.
Echo chambers.
Echo chambers, exactly. Because it's like they all got the same memo and they all read the same talking points. And we need to hear from people
Project Mockingbird
that have actually walked, and it's been a journey, and they're speaking in first person. And it's not, five talking heads on a cable news show.
And if you want to hear about Project Monarch, Project MK Ultra, Mockingbird, if you want to know about high jump, if you want to know about fishbowl, if you want to know about blue beam, if you want to know about the voice of God, if you want to know about giants and grays and reptiles and everything else, I know a lot about that stuff.
Well, that's a whole other show. We'll have to have you back on another time. That's we've just opened. We didn't open another can of worms. We've opened like a worm mine just now. So again,
just
Chief,
remember, everything is a trip graph. Everything's a trinity. Everything's a trip graph. Everything's a trinity. Everything is a fractal of God. I can take any word you have and I can trip graph it, and it'll make sense. And if you go to the middle, you're going to be okay.
And we're going to do that again next time around. Chief, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. God bless you. And
God bless you.
Have some buffalo wings for me while you're up there. Where the actual ones, not the ones that they have, at TGI Fridays or whatever. But thanks for
God
being
is
on.
great. Jesus saves.
All right, Chief Beck, thank you. And we're about to head to a break here as we're headed to that 19th hole. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN, and lot to think about. We'll be back. All righty then. Nothing like some 7-string guitars tuned way the heck down. Gotta love it. I do. Now, yeah, Mac had to dip that because there were some naughty words coming up. Naughty word alert, Yeah, and again, I mean, I told you at the beginning of the show today that it was going to be a wild ride. Now do you believe me? I told you it was going to be a wild ride. But here's the thing. It's so important, and let me just take a second to kind of distill down the pivot point in Chief's story, because in different ways, this is happening all over in a lot of lives, some of whom are being preyed upon because they're too young. I'm sorry, when you have a kid that's pre-K or elementary, and you are opening this whole Pandora's box of what you think you are and what you feel you are and what you... This, as he said, a grown man, issues, things he dealt with in his background, but as a 45-year-old man, here's what it came down to. Presumed predisposition met with manipulation. And that's a recipe for anyone to pivot into becoming what you're not. There was one thing that he touched on I wanted to go back to because it's something that we talk about on this show. It's something that, as a adjunct professor, some of these other hats that I wear, I encourage everyone, but especially young people, put your energies into finding out what you are, not what you feel like you are, not what somebody else said you are. Find out what you are so then you can live your life by doing what you are. Because this path into darkness, we're lured into doing and being what we're not. And we're presumed predisposition, because you can feel like a nut, and I'm doing the Almond Joy commercial now, but that doesn't mean you are. You can feel like something, but it doesn't mean you are something. And now we have whole industries that are bent on convincing you and defining you, and if we let them, they will. So here's the thing that I want us to come away with and think about, kind of, in the light of the things that Chief had to share, and kind of, set aside, whatever linearity, whatever, set aside the differences in, how he may express his journey and his experiences. And again, distill them down to kind of the irreducible minimums of right now, because of just the ubiquitousness of this message, people, young and not so young, are being pushed, impressed, encouraged to consider stories other than the accurate one about themselves. And the stories that we tell ourselves make all the difference in the world. Because if the story you tell yourself is fiction, then the life you live is going to be fiction, and it could be dangerous fiction at that. It's important for us to recognize that our relationships with people have power. And right now, if you're a clear thinker, if you're someone who walks in the light, you're two things. You're a valuable asset, but to your opposition, you're a dangerous weapon. And, Chief shared about how he's under death threat. And there are people who don't like the fact that he left their ranks and is now telling what he believes to be the truth about them, about their doings, about their message, and so on. And I think it's so important. He talked about not hating people. I mean, that's our message on this show. We're not on the same page. We're not even on the same planet. But the thing that we're missing is the ability to agree to disagree. The ability to be passionate about the things we're passionate about, but at the same time, be passionate about other people's right to believe what they want to believe. I may believe with everything in me that you're wrong, and I might have the basis to do so. But ultimately, your relationships with people can put you in a position to be the difference maker. That's what happened with Chief. If you strip everything else away, someone came into his life and flipped on a light that he'd never seen before. And it made all the difference in the world for him. Super Talk 99.7, WTN. It's been awesome to be back. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I can't top this. I'm not even going to try. But tomorrow is Freak Out Friday. So get ready. Get your popcorn and get ready, and we'll see you in the morning. Bye-bye.